so much. I'm going to have to put this guy on wherever they. There we go. Thank you all for being here, and what an honor to be with Justice Breyer. And the documentary looks amazing. So it was special to get a tidbit of that and introduce the fact that the film will be out next March with George Clooney and Meryl Streep. So I'm in. Before I get into your life, I wanted to just ask you a simple question. What is the Supreme Court doing? What does it do?
That's a good question. and the simplest answer, first of all, I want to thank everybody for inviting me. I mean, this has been nice for me. I mean, I get to sit here with Doug Brinkley. You know, there were 4 books in the Widener Library that he didn't write. And then I get to see, imagine, Meryl Streep, and I love Ken Burns. I mean, great, and learn about Thoreau, but Ken Burns, I mean, I can think of the Civil War, jazz.
And he has American Revolution coming out soon, a multi-part. So amazing.
And Vietnam, that's a tough one to watch, but it's well worth it. Well worth it. All right, so what can I say? I mean, I'm in the same boat that probably the senator and the representative are often in when you talk to school children, not you, but when you talk to school children, you have a problem. Because throughout most of a conversation, they're told they're supposed to listen to you, but they're looking out the window. So what is it you can say to get them back from the window? You not have that problem? Of course, but you probably have some things worked out. One of the things is I explain, what do you do on the court? And I read a perfect explanation, at least for the 7th grade, in a French newspaper where a biology professor was traveling from Nantes to Paris. Now, in the basket next to him, he had put 20 live snails. Okay, got it? Now, the conductor comes up, and he says, looks in the basket, and he says, do you have a ticket for the snails? The biology teacher said, what are you talking about? You have to buy a ticket for snails? He said, read the fare book. The fare book says, no animals on the train unless they're in a basket and you produce a half-price ticket. He said, they're not talking about snails. They're talking about, dogs, cats, maybe a rabbit, but not a snail. He says, is a snail an animal? So then I say that to the kids. I say, look, is a snail, what do you think? Does he have to pay or not? And then they start getting into the most horrendous arguments. They start saying, they start saying, well, wait a minute. You have to pay a ticket for a caterpillar? I mean, what about a mosquito? What about a housefly? This is ridiculous. And the other says, is a housefly an animal? All right, it's an animal, isn't it? I say, great. After cutting them off after about 10 minutes of this, I say, now you know what we do on the Supreme Court. I mean, it's not necessarily animal, but what are these words? The freedom of speech. Where do they apply? How do they apply? When do they apply? See, the same kind of a problem. And that kept the 7th graders quiet for at least half an hour. And then, okay, you get the point.
Well, you know what? There was a man named Henry Berg who created the humane movement, and Theodore Roosevelt's father's the one who backed the action because it became a huge court case on our sea turtles were coming in, and they had a big spike on the ships, and they would shove the turtle on the spike, and it would kick. And the argument from the turtle fishing industry was that they don't have feelings, turtles, that they're like insects. There's not a nervous system. And it came up, Harvard ended up and said, yes, they do have feelings. And it became a turtle case, very big thing in New York. And Berg, who created SPCA, lost. But that's how SPCA got money and created, and it still exists today over that turtle case of whether a turtle has feelings or not.
Well, thank you very much. Now I know the answer. The answer, of course, they should have bought a ticket for the snails.
Yeah, there's your answer. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Let me ask you about San Francisco, California, Western terrain, Stanford. How has California influenced you?
I grew up there.
Well, I mean,
First I
think-
got born there. That's the first thing that had to happen. And then I lived there my childhood. My father was attorney for the school board. This is his watch I have. I wear his watch now. It says Irving Breyer, attorney, SFUSD, San Francisco Unified School District, right? 1933 to 1973. That's how I grew up. And it was great. I mean, you know, that I remember it's, as you get older, it's interesting. My theory is your brain begins to peel the outside and you get to the inside, which has these things that happen like, you know, what music do you like? I like The Great Pretender on the top of the hit parade, sung by the Platters in 1947. I mean, that comes through. And the school board in San Francisco, absolutely, absolutely. My fifth grade teacher, Miss Squattarazza, she was a good teacher. She would divide the class. We'd have to write I remember we had to write an essay on San Francisco, a cosmopolitan city. Divide it into groups of 4, 1 grade for each 4. That sort of taught you cooperation. You'd be surprised at how much you listened to the other 3. And that we learned that in school. Those were days when that was, and it's still there. I think of that every time during COVID. We live in Cambridge. Now, very like Cambridge, I mean, it does have a pond, actually, but no Thoreau. But maybe there were, who knows, Emerson, Longfellow, yeah. Okay, in any case, there, when the COVID was there were groups that went around to see, are old people all right? Do they have enough to eat? Are they suffering from the disease? And it wasn't just Cambridge, Mass. It probably was Concord, too. It probably was San Diego, California. It probably was St. Louis, Missouri. All over this country, we're not too bad at that. We're not too bad at getting people in neighborhoods together, work on a project. We have a few projects right here. And, of course. So that's when I grew up. It was before Vietnam.
Did anybody, though, ever, because you have that California background, I remember when FDR picked William O. Douglas in 1937, they were promoting, he's the first Western Supreme Court from Yakima, Washington, and it was but I always, and this is my shortcoming, when I think of you, I think of Massachusetts, I think of Harvard, I think of the East. But you have no pure identification with one region or another. They're just both.
No, I'm a San Franciscan.
You are. Okay.
I'm sorry, I am.
Okay.
I'm not sorry.
No,
I am.
Robert
Most
Frost
of the
was.
time, I'm not. I'll tell you that. It's you are sort of where you grew up, and you can't get that out of you totally. And San Francisco, I think, if my father was given a house in a wealthy neighborhood down the peninsula, Atherton, Hillsborough, he wouldn't have taken it. He wouldn't have taken it because you are, in his mind. He didn't lecture us about it, but he just was. You are a citizen of your community. You participate in the community life. You are, say, a lawyer for the school board or any other thing. And that's what I want the students to take in. That's what I want them to take in. I say, I want you to, I hope, if I have a hope for you, participate. Participate.
You're touching
Be out there.
on this, but what do you think is most important for students today about civics and civic government? And we need to do more civic education in elementary.
Yes, of course. We did. We used to go up to Sacramento. I was out there last week, actually. We'd go up to Sacramento in a bus, and I'd get to sit, and the class would sit in the governor's chair, and we'd get to see the legislature in session, and we'd get to stop at the Nut Tree, which had terrific ice cream, on the way back to San Francisco, and that was all part of 12th grade civics. And we'd have Youth in Government Day, when I think I was public defender or something, but you'd go downtown and you'd follow around a member of the city government or the state government, and all this was designed so that you, as a 12th grade student or 11th grade or whatever it is, would take in, what is this country about civically? How do we run ourselves? What's this document, the Constitution? That's it. What's it about? Okay? And how do I participate? That's what I want them to ask. And they're willing to ask that. They will. They're interested. Okay, that's really the answer. And I think Well, I just bang on the same subject because I think it's an important subject.
Is there a way that we could, in a national way, re-engage making civics mandatory in any kind of way?
You don't have to do it nationally. You can do it state by state. You can. We're coming up to, what is this year?
50th anniversary. Well, I would say 250 of America, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm thinking. Next year. It's next year, the 250th. And I would hope, and I think there will be, because there's a Constitution Center in Philadelphia, and I think they will. And I just heard, I was talking to a group in lots of courthouses in this country, a lot of federal courthouses. They have a kind of a library where you bring high school students in, and you explain the judicial system to them, and they go and watch a case. So they'll get to know it. And there's one in our courthouse here, and there's the Edward Kennedy Senatorial Museum, as well as the Jack Kennedy Presidential Library. And there's no reason you can't hook those up. And there's no reason you can't have a lesson plan. And the lesson plan, we could connect every presidential library. We could connect every senatorial library and courthouses throughout the country. And then you have to have a decent lesson plan. And when I was talking to a group 2 weeks ago, and said, now, it was the Katzman, they have one of those things in the Second Circuit. And I said, well, how many people here are school teachers? 2/3. 2/3 were at that meeting because they're trying to figure out how to do this. They'll figure it out. They will do it. In many places they have it. And when they have it, and they teach it, and you have a lesson plan, and you have to be a teacher, you know what? Those kids won't spend their entire time at the window. They'll be interested.
I couldn't agree more with that. I'm wondering, though, when you were growing up, California, what was your ambition? I'd like to be a lawyer, or did you ever think, gosh, I'd like to work on constitutional issues, or I want to come to Washington? And did you ever imagine when you were young that you would want to be a Supreme Court, could possibly be in the Supreme Court someday?
Oh, well, the answer is no. I did not imagine that. And if you want to know what I wanted to be, I'm trying to decide whether you have to. They had some very interesting garbage trucks in San Francisco. I thought I wanted to be a baseball player in the summer and a garbage collector in the winter. That's the truth of the matter. That is what.
What did your sense of the law kick into you from your
when
father's?
I went to law school.
Yeah.
When I went to law school. And I do try to explain to people, ask me, the students do in college, what should we take to go to law school? My answer normally is, don't take anything to go to law school. You don't need something. Law school happens after you finish college. College is a chance to learn something about somebody else than yourself. You'll know yourself. You'll know your family. You'll know your friends. But there are billions of people in the world you will never know. So take this chance and learn a foreign language. If you learn a foreign language, there will be X million people that you'll have a chance to see what their life is like, and you wouldn't otherwise. Read a few. Take literature, or take history so you know where you are in time and place, and spend time at that. It's a great opportunity, those 4 years. Your parents will think you're really learning something valuable, and they won't ask you too much about it. And you spend your time really with things that you like and things that tell you who you are, where you are, what other people do, and how you form part of this worldwide, really. We just saw that in the film.
Did. And what books were seminal in your reading life when you were your earlier decades, when you were in your, say, teens and 20s?
Well, if you go back far enough, what I used to read was Red Randall in the South Pacific, or possibly The Gnome King of Oz. But later on, what I recommend to the students, I'd say if I pick out 2 or 3 American books that I'd like you to read, I'd say you ought to read The Education of Henry Adams. That's number 1 on my list. Fabulous. Born in 1838, lived to the 1920s, and you begin to see through what he writes what life was like during that long period of time. Very intelligent. And if you're from the West, or even if you're not, I would like you to read, if you want to, Willa Cather. Read The Professor's House. Professor from the Midwest goes to the top of the mesa, sees that beautiful country, like you used to see in the Sierras when you were young. You see it, and you can't forget it. It will be part of you the rest of your life. And if you want to know some history in a novel that you might not otherwise read, find out about the 1890s, read The Age of Innocence, Edith Wharton. And one thing about Age of Innocence, which I love, is there's also a movie. Moreover, it is the only movie book that I can think of where I think that movie is almost as good as the book.
But do you have films that you prefer over the years? Like if somebody's asked you the movies that just stick in your head, it could be your first thought right now.
Sure, of course. When I was a third-year law student, Erwin Griswold, who was the dean, he said third-year students can take any course you want in the college. Okay, so I saw a course in the movies, taught by Stanley Cavell. And I took it, and it was one of the best courses I've ever taken.
Yeah.
And what did he have us watch? He's written a book on it called Pursuit of Pleasure, which I recommend. But what? Well, in particular, the divorce comedies of the 1930s. And after, The Awful Truth, The Philadelphia Story, what's the one with Clark Gable? I can't pronounce. You'll know it probably. It Happened One Night, and then there's the fourth one is Bringing Up Baby. And what is this story? If you want to see a modern movie, or not modern, but moderner, and that is Groundhog Day. Absolutely the same story. And if you want to see an ancient play with the same story, As You Like It. You see, Rosalind falls in love with the wrestler. And this was a problem for many women. They'd fall in love with somebody who really wasn't a genius, or at least not as much. And what should we do? That's why they're called their mothers, the ones who inspired those films, were suffragettes. But they got the vote. And so what are the daughters going to do? They're going to urge films like this, because films like this, what is their object? Their object is to make men behave a little better within marriage. And what is Groundhog Day about? The same thing that Rosalind, in As You Like It, says to her friend and says to Dominic the wrestler, who she's in love with. You don't understand how she falls in love with the wrestler. Look at the version with Laurence Olivier. You'll understand it. But she did. She did. And the point of Groundhog Day is you'll do it till you get it right. You see? Spend enough time, and it works. And that's I love those movies. I think they're great. Say another great movie. I can go on for a while, so I better stop. But a great movie that I like is The Third Man. Yeah, great movie. Not done by what's his name? Who do I mean? What? Orson Welles. Not done by Orson Welles. It's Carroll. It's an English director, James Carroll, something Carroll. But Orson Welles is in it. And he's on the Ferris Wheel. A great movie. And French movies are pretty good. I used to have to look at those, and I love them. The one that I thought was maybe the greatest of all time is Les Enfants du Paradis, Children of the Gods, with Arletty. And if you're tired of American movies, you can't look at Meryl Streep every day. Go look at this French actress from the 1920s and 30s, Arletty. I mean, she's wonderful. And Jean Gabin, and they have some very, very good movies. And so I'll stop now.
No, but when you mentioned the Ferris wheel, that became in 1893. That got it was seen as an impossible engineering feat. It was built by George Washington Ferris, who sold it to James Burnham and Frank Lloyd Wright, the Chicago people. And it premiered in 1893, the Circle, and it was supposed to outbeat the Eiffel Tower. It was a counter statement to
that's very
France.
interesting. George Washington Ferris?
Ferris,
His name?
yes.
That's very interesting.
And that first one, they took it down, but then the Ferris wheels were built all over counties in America. And I was mentioning you writing on Route 66. It begins at a Ferris wheel in Chicago at the Navy Pier, and it ends at the Santa Monica Pier. There's also a Ferris wheel, and it's a symbol of America, the Ferris wheel. I always thought it had a European feel, but it's as Americana as you get. Information you don't need, but I love talking about art, culture. It's so fun. And you mentioned your early liking of the platters and music. Like, what is it like at your home here? Like, do you listen to music often? Classical music
but
or
we
jazz?
have living with us because of a family situation. We have 3 grandchildren. So I say we live in the ruins of our house.
Oh, really?
And sure, I listen sometimes in the evening, and Joanna says, "What in heaven's name is that?" And when it turns out to be was your hit parade with Dorothy Collins, Giselle McKenzie, and Snooky Lanson, and your hit paraders singing, say, "Shrimp Boats Are A-Coming" or "The Yellow Rose of Texas" or something like that.
Well, wherever you go, once you become you're part of a distinguished club, Supreme Court justice, what actually is the definition in your mind of being a justice?
No, being appointed. Well, there are many judges who are called justice, so you can't. You mean on the Supreme Court?
Yes.
Being appointed to the Supreme Court.
But what about Justice Adam? You hear of the not just Supreme Court, but what does that word mean when you carry it around with you? I was on the. It's yes, a fact you're on the Supreme Court, but what the word justice mean for you? What is that? Is it simply to interpret the Constitution and its amendments, or is there a larger meaning of being a justice?
Well, that's getting into this book. I mean,
and the book here, guys, reading the Constitution. This is a main thread, and you have to not only does he like Edith Wharton, but he writes very well, and this is a great book. I hope you all get it. But please, on justice.
Well, when I went to law school, I mean, the people who were much admired, and when you go to school or university or law school or wherever you end up in your life, you remember pretty well what you learned when you were, let's say, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, in there. And the judges who were admired, whom of course I still admire, were people like Oliver Wendell Holmes and Cardoza and Brandeis and Learned Hand. And the course, which was general about law, what's law about? Why do we have systems of law? They're human systems. It was Hart and Sachs, and they said, in America, the system of law is there for a reason. It's there to help the 330 million people now in this country. You know, of every race, every religion, every point of view. My mother used to say that. She said, "There's no view so crazy, there isn't somebody in this country who doesn't hold it." And then she'd add, remember saying, "But don't tell anyone I said this." But she would add, "And they all live in Los Angeles," she said. Yeah, okay. So that's what and so law, you read the words first. And there's a great French jurist, Portalis, who wrote the civil code, basically. And he said the first thing you do is the words, and if the words are clear, you just follow what the words say. But the words are never clear. And so you look to other things, too. What's the purpose? And they did that in the 18th century, which, let's look, what mischief was Congress trying to cure? What was the purpose of this law? And what will happen if you decide this way or that way? And does that which will happen, or that how you're interpreting it, is it consistent with the values that are still there in this little book, or other values that Americans hold? And you look at the history, what was the argument going on in the country then? And if you go to the Constitution, since most of the words are pretty abstract, you're not going to get too far by just reading the words. But what about looking in a statute at the words, just the words, nothing else? Nino Scalia and I used to debate this before law school audiences or college audiences in different parts of the country. He was a good friend, but he had a different point of view. He said, just look at the words. Don't look at the purposes. Don't look at the consequences. Don't look at the values, just look at the words. And with the Constitution, he would say, no, what you should do is look at what the words, even if abstract, meant at the time that they were written. Say 1787, 88, 89, say 1870, around then. See what they meant to the ordinary person. Now, that's come up fairly recently, last 20, 30, 40 years, but it swept the law. I mean, there are an awful lot of people that hold that point of view. Why? Because those who hold it say, first, you just read the words, it will be simpler. Second, it will make the law uniform throughout the country. Third, Congress will like it because they'll know what's going to happen to the statute they pass. Fourth, it will prevent judges from substituting what they think is good for the law. Four promises. I say, when we debate, I'd say those promises are great. Great promises. Unfortunately, Nino, you can't keep any of them. Did George Washington know about the internet? I would say that. You know what he would say? What? I'd say George Washington didn't know about the internet. And he would say, I knew that.
Yeah.
But he'd say it's like this. It's like the two campers. He said, one is putting on his running shoes. The other says, what are you doing? He says, I'm putting on my running shoes. There's a bear in the camp. The other one says, you can't outrun a bear. The other one says, but I can outrun you. Yeah, and that was his view. You see where he's coming from?
Yes.
And who will know who's right? Who will know? 50 years from now. I won't be here. But who knows? Who knows? But I think the promises can't be kept. And that book is filled with examples. I put example after example in this book of cases that we had because I know that 4,000 law professors will say they know the theories of this thing better than I do. But I can very meanly say, yes, but I've had some experience you haven't had. and that's what I'm writing from. And I'm saying, well, what do you mean? We only take cases in the Supreme Court, almost 100%, or lower court judges have come to different conclusions on the same question of federal law. That's probably Congress and the Constitution, you see? Because if they've come to the same conclusion, what need for us? They're perfectly good judges. But if they've come to different conclusions, which happens but not too often, we better take it, because the law should be uniform across the country. All right, so they're not, what's an example? I put the easiest example I could find, the easiest. We have a case, some of you, probably most of you know this, that if you unfortunately have a child with a handicap, some kind of problem, the school board, under federal law, has to have special instruction. If you, the parents, feel they're not doing a good job at the school board, you can bring a federal lawsuit against them. And if you win, and now these are the key words in the statute, if you win, they have to pay, not only, they have to change their system, but they also have to pay your, are you ready, costs. So the case in front of us involved a woman who did win. And she wanted her, what she said were her costs, educational expert, $29,000. But the school board said cost doesn't include that. They just mean legal costs, like maybe they just mean filing fees, you see? So I say, what do we do? That's what I wrote in the dissent. Oh, I see. We're supposed to read the word. Okay. Read it carefully. All right, I'll read it carefully. Let's try it. Costs. Got it? Okay, or maybe I should read it several times. Costs. I said, of course it's not going to tell you. I mean, that's why Portley said that. It's very rare that the language is so clear. And so let's look to those other things. And we have a better chance of directing sometimes, we hope, and we'll never know for sure. The interpretation helps with the basic direction of the law, helps people live together who are affected by it peacefully and productively. maybe, at least some of the time. So now you don't have to read the book. But that's, and I do that with a lot of constitutional cases, the gun cases. All right, Clarence Thomas, who's a friend. We all get on well. I've never heard a voice raised in anger in that conference room, ever. Nor have I, at 28 years, nor have I ever heard one of those judges say something mean about another one in that conference room, not even as a joke. It's very professional. Go around and we discuss and listen to what other people say, and you have a discussion. You try to get 5 people on one, and probably 40% or so are unanimous. But he did write a case that was not unanimous, because I wrote one of my lengthier dissents, which I would recommend were it not so lengthy, but about allowing people to have guns. That was the thrust of it. If they used to have guns of the same type in 1789 or whatever. So I had been reading a book written by an English judge who had just retired, who was a historian, and it's on the 100 Years' War. It's 5 volumes, 700 pages each. And if you're having trouble, look, it's 100 Years' War minute by minute. But I knew some of those weapons, so I put in the opinion. I said, now, what is a halberd stand for? What is its lineal descendant, or a skill ladder? Or Asian fire, which you throw over the wall to burn the city down on the other side. I said, is that the godfather of the bazooka? I don't know, and nor does I think any of the judges know. We're not historians. And the briefs help, but they don't always determine the outcome. But you see, this has examples in it like that. And of course, my object is to say, go back and see how deciding it this way or deciding it that way, how will it work? How will it work? What will be the consequences? What was the object? What are the values here that underlie this document? Democracy, free, basic liberty, equality, rule of law, etc.
And you're so well known and respected for your dissents. What is the power of dissent in U.S. Supreme Court history, and which one of the dissents are you most proud of, or one that you'd like to talk about for a few minutes?
Well, first, if you write a dissent, you've lost. Yeah, that's important, because what you're really writing the dissent for is it's not really decided till it's decided. And you're really writing the dissent to convince one of your colleagues or more to come over to your side. And if they don't, they still might change how they wrote the opinion. And that matters, because people, lawyers and others, read those opinions and they see how they're written. They see what they're talking about, and that can make a big difference. And no one likes to look like an idiot. So if, in fact, you put something in the opinion that shows that the other side is completely wrong, they may change something, even if they don't come over completely. You see? And that happens fairly frequently. That happens fairly frequently because of oral arguments, because of the discussion at the conferences, because of the written document that emerges. So that's what I'm after. First, convince. Second, at least make it more hospitable. And that happens. That happens. So what am I most well known is probably, I'll tell you what it probably was, but I mean a virtue of writing this, or there was a case before the recent case about affirmative action. And I thought, and Ruth Ginsburg thought, and she wrote on this, which I joined, that the Equal Protection Clause, guaranteeing in the 14th Amendment everyone equal protection of the laws, applied differently when you use race in order to help bring people into our society than when you use race to keep people out. So we rewrote and said that we thought there was more leeway. All right, the way the case worked out is 4 people, and eventually it became law recently. But then 4 people thought you could not have affirmative action. No discrimination on the basis of race, period. Okay? 4 people thought, just what I said, that you had more leeway under the law when you're trying to bring people into the society that we live in rather than trying to keep them out. And 1 person wrote a different kind of a thing, okay? So it was no real decision. But we announced the decisions from the bench. Okay, it was John Roberts, the Chief Justice, who announced the 4 who wanted no discrimination at all. So he said, how did I get into this story? It's a little embarrassing. But nonetheless, he said, well, the way is, understand it. He said, the way to stop discriminating is to stop discriminating. Now, at that point, I was going to discuss my dissenting opinion. And I thought to myself, well, if we're going to decide this case by bumper stickers, I have a few bumper stickers too.
Yeah.
So when it was my turn to speak, I said, well, rarely in the law have so few so often changed so much. I didn't make that up, Churchill did. I just sort of adapted it. And I was sort of pleased with that because it annoyed everybody else. I didn't want to annoy them, but nonetheless, it was a very, very interesting case, though now it's changed.
And with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, what was your relationship like with her? And she's become an icon for a certain segment of the American population.
Oh, she was great. I mean, she's the kind of person that the more you know her, the better you like her. And she worked pretty hard. You know, I'd go into her office sometimes to tell her a joke. And she did laugh. But then she would get up and go over to her stand-up desk, and I knew that meant time to leave. And we were good friends, and she was great. She was great. And right, and fun.
When you're chosen by a president, like President Clinton, or whoever you are, and you make the Supreme Court, do you realize immediately you're going to be tied to the hip of history with who chose you, is that a burden, or you just shake that off?
You won't be tied to the hip of anything. Once you're appointed, you're there a long time. And the one thing that the president said, which I think everyone on the court should take in, and you do take it in after a while. Justice Douglas said it takes 5 years. David Souter said it takes 3 years, but it takes some years. And what you realize after a while, what the president said, is the applause dies away very fast, much faster than you think. And you are left with the job, so you better like it. And the very good advice. Why? I was there 2 or 3 years, and I went to some reception there, and a young lawyer came up and said, "Oh, Justice Breyer, you write such good opinions. Would you ever sign my program?" So I signed his program. As he walks off, he turns to his friend and he says, "That makes 4." Yeah. Okay? Yeah, that's what it is. But the job it's a privilege, and many people have this and many people don't. As you get older, to have a job where you have to give your best every time. I mean, you do. And after a while, you realize maybe, I don't know if I can do it, you think at the beginning. I thought I could. I'll try. And then you realize you do your best. And that's about it. And you can't just, say this one's not so important. No, they're all important. And that's true. It's like being a doctor. It's like being a doctor. You want to read what that's like? Read Camus' book. I should have mentioned that. The Plague. Popular at the time of COVID. And what he says about a doctor is a person who does good without philosophizing. He just does it. He just does it. Time after time after time. And that's a privilege. That's a privilege, and it requires work, and being a judge should be like that. It should be like that. You try. You won't necessarily get it right, but you'll try.
Are you concerned, and it might be more in the media sphere than true reality, but it seems to be there's an uptick of justices and judges being threatened. What can one do about that as a national issue?
When that comes up, and it does sometimes, as you've brought it up, I say it is a very bad thing to threaten anyone. Anyone. If what you mean is physical injury, don't do it as a joke or anything. No. I mean, of course. And you want to go, I mean, I say that sometimes because, people at Harvard and other places sometimes take the present moment very seriously, as they should. It's reasonable to take it very seriously. But I was there teaching during Vietnam. And you want to know what it felt like if you weren't there. Go look at Bobby Kennedy's speech at Indianapolis. He was giving that speech in a poor neighborhood, primarily black neighborhood, on the day that Martin Luther King was assassinated. And the governor told him, don't go. Well, he went. And he spoke to the group, and you can hear the murmuring, and the news is just getting around that Martin Luther King was assassinated. And what you can't help but think is he quotes Aeschylus, the pain and why we have to get together and so forth and so on. But what you think is 2 or 3 years ago, his brother was assassinated. 2 or 3 weeks from then, or months, I think, he will be killed. Martin Luther King was killed today. Students were killed at Kent State. Watts was burned down. There were all kinds of things going on then. All kinds of things. And and we got over them. Because Senator Kennedy, whom I worked for, used to say that. He says, the country goes like this. First it's over here, then it goes over there. But we've gotten out. Not always. We did have slavery. We did have a civil war. We did have segregation. We've had all sorts of things. But gradually, we come together, we hope.
Are you optimistic about our time? I use the line often to students that history is to remind us that our own times aren't uniquely oppressive, and that you have to be hopeful and work for change. But do you have pessimism in you at all, or are you
yes,
an optimist?
I have some pessimism and some optimism. Usually the optimism is a little bit more, and what I like to think about at that moment is go back to where we started with the 7th grade students or the high school students. I like talking to them. And they'll say, well, how do we interpret this document? I say, my friends, this document is not mine anymore. It's yours. You are the ones who are going to have to figure this one out. Okay? And then I'll say what Senator Kennedy told his staff. The first thing he said was, don't worry so much about credit. If something succeeds that you do, there'll be plenty of credit to go around. And if it doesn't succeed, who wants the credit? So he'd say, and then he would add, when we're having trouble getting something through or stopping something we want stopped, you find somebody whom you believe is intelligent, perhaps on another senator's staff. You believe that person is intelligent and genuinely and honestly believes the contrary of what you think. Then sit down and listen. Don't talk too much. But they'll talk. And eventually they'll say something that you really agree with. And as soon as they say something you really agree with, you say, what a good idea you have. Okay? Let's see if we can work with that. And he would add, you might be able to get sometimes 30% of what you want. If you can get 30%, take it. Don't hold out for 100%, which you won't get, and all your followers will think you're wonderful. No, you're there to get something that will be helpful to people. So take the 30%. And I heard him so many times when there was a success, the news, the press, the journalists would ask, oh, Senator Kennedy, he'd say, you did such a good job on that bill. He'd say, don't thank me, thank Orrin Hatch, the Republican, who came up with an idea that allowed us to get together. And I say, that's what you can do. That's what you can do. You can try that and see if it doesn't work, or at least help. And you're back in your books. This line that meant something, I said at graduations, I'll say, I hope you find someone to love, I hope you find a job that you like, and I hope you participate in public life. School board, library, what you want, working with others whom you might disagree with. Fine. Get together. Find ways you can work together. And the book, Derek Bach wrote a book with Bowen, I think, on education.
Yes.
And he has in there a line which he says, I don't know if it does, he says is from Pericles, famous funeral oration. Famous funeral oration. Yeah. Athens, 2,000 years ago. And in that oration, Derek says he put, what do we say in Athens about the man who does not participate in public life? We do not say he is a man who minds his own business. We say he is a man who has no business here. Now, what is it that makes me optimistic? Not what I just said for the last 5 minutes. Rather, that when I say it to the 7th graders, or maybe to the high school students, they're suddenly not looking out the window anymore. A large number have stopped doing that, and they're actually listening. And maybe I'm making it up, but I don't think so. I think from the look in their eye, what they're telling me, just the way they're looking, just the way they're listening, they want to help. They want to help. They want to be part of this country. They want to help bring people together. And they want to find ways to do it. And so if I'm telling them one possibility via Senator Kennedy, etc., good. They want to take that in. Now, as long as those students have that look and are interested in that, I remain on the basics, basically, an optimist.
Well, it's beautifully said. I couldn't agree more. We're going to wind down here, but you mentioned Athens, and here we are. We're going to, and many people here from Concord, and it's 250th anniversary, Lexington and Concord, the shot heard around the world. Don't want you to play judge here and make a decision, but Lexington versus Concord. On the importance of in the American Revolution.
Well, we'll see. We'll find out from Ken Burns.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I say, if it comes up, I say it shows the power of the poet. Just go to the bridge. Here are the, what was it? Here the embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard round the world. Now, as long as that's carved into those pillars, no one's going to think Lexington outside of Lexington.
We'll end with the last question that I learned from Don Henley and Kathy and people that work at the Walden Woods Project, and it's great to do with young people. But we talk about a sanctified landscape like Walden Pond, or a place that lives on in the natural world, or is there a place that's your Walden Pond? I'm thinking more in a location, a place that in your life you thought or stood there and you reflect and think about it as it could be a farm or a
but that's
park.
San Francisco. You see, that's,
it gets
you
back
ask
to
a
San
San
Francisco.
Franciscan, what they'll think of is even now in my brother's apartment looking out at the Golden Gate Bridge, or looking at the Pacific Ocean, or being up in the Sierras and looking over Lake Tahoe. And you can't forget that. That's why Willa Cather is right. At the top of the mesa.
And we do, Stephen Kennedy Smith's here, and he works constantly with these Profiles in Courage Award, and they gave one to Mike Pence for January 6th. Is there anybody that you've looked at with all your wisdom that you just really admire for their courage in your lifetime? A president or even somebody you've read about that wasn't of your lifetime, that you find their courageous stance on behalf of the United States, on behalf of democracy, is meaningful and stays with you?
Well, there are a lot. I mean, you think back at the framers. I mean, look, for example, Jefferson thought all kinds of things, in particular that the federal government shouldn't do much. So read the book about, was it Jefferson or Adams?
Yeah.
The greater of the two, the historians. They said, look what Jefferson did. Two things. One, that line in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure those rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. You see, 2 lines. And he will never be forgotten because of that. And it came time to improve the country, expand the country, or live up to his belief federal government should do nothing. No, he said expand the country. And he bought Louisiana. And that doubled it in size and improved it. So you can look all over, and you can find in lives that you may not at first have thought there's something. There's something. And that's actually, I mean, as you get older, you see that. I mean, the court, you're annoyed at somebody or other, they have something. You're annoyed at some professor because he said something. No, he has something. People have different things. That's trite, and everybody says it, but it's true. People have different virtues, different things to give, and you convince them to give it. Good for the country.
I think that's a wonderful place to end it. Thank you so much, Justice Breyer. Honored. An honor. Thank you. Reading the Constitution.